Let's go beyond the connection. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host, and today we've got a super interesting guest on. We have Jon Manes. Now, Jon, you're the VP of Information Technology at Mambo Seafood Restaurants. That always starts to describe what you do and your background and your history, and I'm going to ask you to explain a little bit more about that. But one of the things that I found very fascinating is what your wife described you as, is that you burn bright and that whatever you do, you get into and you learn everything that you can. Whether it was like archery that you were into and you were doing for 10 years, photography, but also your vocation. And so, what we're going to talk about today is how information technology drives revenue growth. We are not a support department, right? We are not a cost center. We are direct connection to customer experience, revenue growth. We support every single department and enable them. And so we're going to get into that today. But before we do, I would love to have you just maybe expand a little bit more on your background before we get started.
Sure. So I've been in restaurant technology for most of my career, about 20 years now. I was with a company called K&N Management in Austin, Texas for almost 17 of those years. We owned and operated the Austin area Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue. We created a concept called Mighty Fine Burgers, Fries, and Shakes. From there, I went to another barbecue place called Smoky Moe's Barbecue. And now I'm here at Mambo Seafood. But I think what really kind of changes it from me versus maybe some other people in my field is my focus is less on even the technology side and more on the people. I'm trying to make sure that people have everything that they need to get their job done, which, we all do. What I think is really important about technology in the restaurant space is helping people get their job done day to day and making sure that not only are they able to do their job, but they're able to do it without anything that holds them back, and to support them at a level that is not only on, is my mouse working, is my phone working, is my internet working, but also has someone thought through the process for what I'm doing day to day, and I have the right software selected for me. We didn't just go out and pick a AP software that allows us to put in journal entries and stuff. We picked the one that was right for this particular business. So that type of thing.
What was really great about our first conversation was how much you get into and you learn and you impact the business from operations to how are you enabling the right scheduling software and management and systems and understanding the managers in the restaurants and what their needs are so they can be much more efficient in that, from that to ordering to all kinds of things that we're going to talk about today. If you think about it, IT is kind of the center of the wheel, and we can do the bare minimum and support requests that are coming in, or we can be proactive, right? And that's what I think you excelled so much at, is proactively meeting and understanding and enabling. But I'm going to ask you up front here, you've got a really rich restaurant IT background. What are some of the unique challenges that we can understand that come in the restaurant business, a very distributed environment, right? You're constantly adding new restaurants and going. What do you think are kind of some of the unique characteristics or challenges in the restaurant industry?
I think you have all of the everyday things that the point of sale is not working or whatnot. And what's different from a technology standpoint with that is most IT firms, for example, like an MSP, when you call for support, talking about support specifically, they expect to call you back in an hour, and someone will get to you in 4 hours, something like that. But in the restaurant environment, if your point of sale goes down, you have people standing in front of you trying to pay, and we've all experienced that. You go into a restaurant, you're picking up your food to go, and you try to pay, and it's, oh, my POS is down, hold on. There's a sense of urgency there that just doesn't exist across other environments for IT, but it does in the restaurant space. So we have to have a support line for them that is extremely fast and nimble and understands what they're going through. So understanding what the people themselves are experiencing when they're standing in front of a line of 5 or 6 people and they're not able to take even one payment, they have a lot of stress on their shoulders in that moment. And so being empathetic to that and able to know exactly what they need to hear is very important. So not only, hey, we got you, just follow these instructions and let's work through it one step at a time.
You know what I love? I love the very first thing on the unique challenges of the restaurant industry. You jump right to customer experience. And, to accentuate that, there was a study done by McKinsey and Company a couple of years ago, and they looked at over 400 different companies, B2C, B2B companies that were very, very highly profitable, biggest return on shareholder value. And the number one differentiator across all those companies, all those industries was customer experience. The number one differentiator. So I think that to me accentuates that you have a focus on when we talk about enabling, what are the levers in the business that you can help support that are the biggest drivers for growth? And I know you've experienced, we never want to, but when a restaurant goes down, that is mayhem. So when you think about keeping the network up and live, because it's the heartbeat of the organization, what are some of the most important things that come to mind in terms of what I got to keep focused on? What are my responsibilities to make sure that that network doesn't go down?
Sure. And that kind of falls toward what you were saying a minute ago about planning ahead. So we have multiple redundancies, not only from a network connection standpoint, but from a power standpoint. We actually, in our restaurants, have deployed some additional power backups that will hold the internet itself up for up to 10 hours. And then we have at least two internet providers, one being generally a landline of some kind, and another being a cellular backup, which is all pretty standard. We even have one site that because the landline couldn't get put in before we opened, they have two cellular providers. So two different carriers are providing in that building, and both of them have such great signal. We don't have a copper line. We don't have a fiber line. It's running great. Even our high resolution cameras run great over this cellular network. But as time goes on, I'm expecting to see more and more of that. And then as that goes on, other vendors just require high availability from an internet standpoint, from a network standpoint. I even have one vendor that's key to our everyday operation who they operate on an expectation that your internet's going to be up in order for them to function at the highest capability they can and provide the best support to our staff and to our guests.
It's interesting because when you talk about wireless connections and you've got a restaurant that's 100% wireless, right? Sometimes just the cost of that last mile connectivity is just prohibitive in the setup and everything. But there's a trend in the industry that I guess you could just call it wireless first. But there's kind of a slow adoption in certain areas of the IT community because wireless in our mind is kind of like not as reliable, comes in and out. And how can I possibly put my business on a wireless first strategy? But you said something in there that you think is going to become more and more important. I just wanted to know from a guy that burns bright and looks into this, what is the wireless first kind of future? What does that look like? And why should we want to be more and more dependent on wireless?
Well, as the technology increases and we get to where it's more and more stable and you have less issues even just in your restaurant. So we use like handheld devices to go to our tables and take orders. And you walk around to the outside of the patio and maybe the wireless isn't quite as good there. So then it's our job to make sure that this gets covered, that someone doesn't say, does a full survey, readjust where the APs are, adjust the direction that the antennas are pumping the signal, and make sure that that area is covered and that every area is covered at all times. Because as time goes on, you're going to have these devices. Like we all carry a cell phone with us. And right now, almost everybody is living wireless first, whether they think about it or not. Without aging myself too far, you go back to where you have nothing like that. You want to talk to someone, you either went to them or you picked up a phone that was plugged into a wall. Now, no one in the current generation is going to expect to live their life with the wire. They're going to expect it to be wireless. And so everything going forward is going to be that way. So we need to build and prepare for that. And honestly, it even saves costs on NROs or new restaurant openings because as you get to that point, it's just less things that have to actually, you have to pay someone to run a wire. You have to pay someone to run even just sometimes we use serial cables and that'll still be there. But if those devices change, like we have printers that are serial, so they plug into a device. But now they changed to IP. They don't have to be on a wire. They could be on wireless and be just as fast. So the same vendor I was telling you about a second ago, they use wireless printers and those operate just as quickly as our wired printers. As time goes on, I'm expecting to see things like that, even to the point of our kitchen screens, KDSs. So you have them run to your fry station, your rice station, your grill or saute or your soup station. And then you have some in the expo area. They all are plugged into wire. And you know what our number one problem is? The wire gets disconnected because someone bumped into it. Well, these things are all capable of being wireless, but the vendors don't support it yet. But they will one day. Once they do, you'll be in good shape. At least the vendors I'm currently with. But there are vendors that are running on iPads already. So their kitchen screens are already wireless. It's you provide power and we're good to go. So there's already restaurant vendors in general that are completely wireless on everything they do. And I think over time, everyone's going to have to go that route or just be left behind.
Yeah, you're kind of discussing the Internet of Things, from kitchen displays to wireless payment systems that are out on the patio. Like, we're getting more and more and more dependent on that. So I guess the direct question is, like you said, there is technology today. Like, the wireless first future is actually here today. We don't have to wait for it. So if somebody was to say, I'm still not sold, I'm hesitant. I have my old expectations and perceptions of wireless. What would you say to them when you've got restaurants that are up and running on wireless only?
Yeah, I mean, I would say come by, take a look. If we had one that was 100% wireless, go into those restaurants, ask the people that are using that equipment. And I guarantee you they have less downtime overall than the ones that are on wired. And not that wired is a problem in general, but it is a break point. It's a failure point. So it's a place where that cable is going to come unplugged, that cable is going to get bent. They're going to move the screen around, they're going to move the printer around because they need to get to that space and the adapter for it might come undone. But if it was completely wireless, none of that's going to happen. They're going to scoot it over. It's going to keep working. It's going to come right back. Same like additional. We're talking about IoT. Like we have thermostats, for example. Our vendor came in and they installed thermostats and they're like, hey, we need these on wireless. Okay, no problem. We'll hook them up on wireless. And so now they're all connected that way. They connect sensors to your Wi-Fi as well. It might be 2.4 gigahertz, might be 5 gigahertz. They all give you the range. And then your challenge comes from a networking standpoint. It's the planning of, does it exist on the same access points that you already had, or do you give it dedicated ones or whatnot in order to maintain the best quality of service to all the devices? And of course, with the guest facing devices being the most important.
So I'd love to transition over kind of away from the wireless first future and back to the kind of main subject here today, which is how we're driving revenue growth. So if in your mind, just what are some of the top two or three things that come to mind in terms of how you support revenue growth in the business?
Yeah, so having a seat at the table, I think, is one of the things you and I talked about before. Meaning, when we have leadership meetings about kind of anything going on, not just IT, but everyone, every department head is in that same meeting, and we're all discussing it together equally, and everyone can provide their own feedback. And because of that, we don't miss anything from one particular angle. Everyone sees it from a different point of view. And that would be true if it was an all hands IT meeting and we're all sitting in one room. Everyone has different experiences and we're all providing feedback. And then we ultimately end up in the one decision. But the other thing you get there is buy in. Everyone is completely bought in because they've all contributed. So we all work together in order to make decisions. I like to think that what I can provide too is definition on whether or not technology is needed in the solution. Sometimes the solution doesn't need to be technology based. Sometimes it very well does. And I can bring something I've experienced, something I've done before, something I've just read about and like, hey, I stay on top of these things. I've heard about this. Should we explore it? Or someone else comes to the table and they say, hey, we've seen this software. Can you look into that? And I have a pretty good process for defining if it's a good software for our company, for our business, and what we're trying to do. So I think in general, that level of communication with the leadership team allows me to help make the right decisions and ultimately drive revenue. Further than that, we can also look at it from a standpoint of how do we maximize efficiency inside the restaurants in the future? And I don't know 100%, but I know some players who are already kind of using it already. And the ones I'm most excited about are ones that can allow our kitchen screens to be much more accurate. I'll put it that way. So if we say for an online order, someone says it's going to be 20 minutes, when you show up and you're waiting for an extra 20 minutes, why is that? Is it because they just quoted you 20 minutes with no knowledge whatsoever, which happens a lot? Or you utilize an online ordering system that has some numbers that we fed into it, and they say, okay, in general, this is what it's going to be. Is that as accurate as you can get? But at some point in the near future, I think we're going to be seeing software vendors that come in and analyze every individual station in the kitchen. And not only at that level, but at who's working that station. And you got one person works this station so efficiently most of the time, he drives the actual time down a little bit. So now you're talking about you could use that information for scheduling. So this type of thing is very exciting. And then scheduling in general, also, we could take that off the plate of the managers at some point, and it can be completely AI driven. They have that same information I just talked about. You know, you're going to be busy in the seafood restaurant. You're going to be super busy on Good Friday. And now everyone knows, put your A players in there, your key players, the best people at each particular station. But maybe the person you think is the most effective because they've been there for 20 years isn't technically the most effective. And it's this guy who's been there for a year and a half and he's just really honed his craft and he's good at that station, where the data will tell us that. And I think in the near future, we're going to be seeing software that does this kind of thing.
It's amazing. We're in this world of digital transformation. And I think it was Deloitte that said, even like 4 or 5 years ago, the difference between the business of today and the business of tomorrow is digital transformation. So if you can much more accurately predict somebody's ordering in the app and it says, yeah, 20 minutes, and they get there and the customer experience is the exact opposite. I'm going to give you an example. I went and took my car in to a Toyota dealership this weekend, and I had a 7:40 appointment. They opened at 7:30. I sat there for 50 minutes in a line, just waiting to talk to the customer service representative. The customer experience from the very beginning. And then when I actually met with the rep and they said, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do I want to do? I made a whole appointment. I actually talked to somebody. It's the 60,000 mile checkup and we're going to do these other two. They had no idea. Customized orders, orders on time, all of this is all part of that customer experience. That's the number one differentiator. So it's so important that the data supports the business and that we're pulling all that together and all those internet things, all the backgrounds of the people and their efficiencies. Oh, I love the pictures you're painting here. You talked about a dual role in IT, and I think we've been talking on both sides. One is an information architect, and the other is a business strategist, right? In between those two defined roles, where do you feel like you live, and where's the biggest return to the business coming from?
You know, I live in both, probably equally. From the day-to-day support level and keeping everything up and running, we have vendors for that, like I told you before. And one of those is a company called Science on Call. And Andy, who owns and operates it, one, they're just the best people for restaurant support specifically. Everyone there comes from restaurants. Everything I described before, they know what it's like when you're a manager and you're on the phone with somebody and you got the guest right in front of you. They understand that, and they know also all the equipment in front of you. It's not just regular computers. These are terminals. They function a little differently. So I'm very, very lucky to be able to use a company like them for my frontline support. And I just follow up with them. They escalate things to me and to my teammate here. So I live in the day to day a little bit with them and with my IT manager who directly manages them and following up on tickets and making sure that everything is completed as fast as possible. But then, you know, I also live in kind of where we were a minute ago, where we're talking about what does marketing need to be successful and what can I do to help marketing be more successful? What can I do on a day-to-day basis that makes the guest experience better? I mean, everything we're talking about 100% in the hospitality industry is about guest experience. It's guest experience digitally, it's guest experience in person where the technology exists, but you need it to get out of the way. What can I do to help build a loyalty program that is going to be perfect for this particular brand and these particular guests, the way that these guests want to use it? How do we take that information and then use it to spread the good word about Mambo Seafood and get more people in here to help grow the brand? So that type of thing is what I'm kind of always looking for and trying to figure out how I can help my other department heads here like I said, whether it be marketing or operations or facilities or accounting or whoever, what can I do? They're all my guests as well. So how do I make their day more efficient and better? And at the end of the year, I can look back on it and say, there was nothing left unturned. I made all the progress I could make. Now, what does our progress for next look like? And I run through a process each year. We as a team here at Mambo, we create our 1, 3, 5 year plan, and then you just keep pushing down that road. So for me, those things aren't just things that we say one time, and then when the time comes back up, we got to touch it again. But we live it every single day, and if you don't stay on top of it, you're not actually growing as a company. So technology is a large part of it. So I definitely live in there specifically, but that higher level of what are we all doing every single day to make sure we're looking forward and we're all rowing in the same direction. Right now we're building restaurants and we're remodeling restaurants and we are adding loyalty here at Mambo. So these are all the things that are my individual day to day. But then at the same time, I am talking with some of these other vendors that can help in the things that we were just talking about. And I'm trying my best to stay a step or two ahead of what's coming out. And I listen to podcasts like yours and try and hear what other people are saying and other people are doing and learn from them.
This focus on customer experience and the guest, and I love how you talked about the other different departments are your guests as well. I love that focus. It's such a visual way to kind of feel that because when you talk about business growth, if we're not helping to support marketing and sales and operations, and if we're not doing all of that, then we're not doing our job. But just as we need to understand the needs of the guests that are in the restaurants, we need to understand the needs of the guests that are internally that we're supporting. If you had like one story, we remember things 22 times better, according to Harvard, when it's told to us in the form of a story. In terms of supporting your internal guests, is there like a story that comes to the top of mind that you wouldn't mind telling us?
In terms of supporting internal guests, it's not like one particular event that happened on one day, but it's something I did that I'm kind of proud of. But I'm not the one who designed it. So pride's maybe not the right word. We did it as a team. So back at K&N, we developed an intranet effectively, but like a little dashboard website where all managers could go. And it had all the normal stuff. It had sales and we did inspections as well, where people would go around like a health inspection, but also a process inspection. And we had a particular person who would inspect and he would fill it out and everybody would get rated and they'd see how they were against each other. And so they had this like quick touch point every single day at any given point to see where they stacked. But another thing it had that I've always really thought was an amazing idea is we recorded every single guest comment. And I don't just mean complaints, I mean comments. So if a guest comes over and says, man, the barbecue was amazing today, because this was a barbecue restaurant, somebody recorded that. They wrote it down on a little piece of paper. And at the end of the day, they typed it into the website. And then every morning, every manager in the company got all of the comments from their store. And what was interesting about that for me is on the one hand, it tells everyone immediately how good you're doing, not how bad you're doing. And you also see the negatives and you can actually glean actionable information from it. For example, we even had a checkbox that was market urgent. And let's say you had a guest came in and their experience was so terrible. You want people to know about it right away, respond to that guest right away. They mark it urgent and email fires off. And the entire leadership team gets it, your PM gets it, their GM gets it, and people are responding to that guest right away. So it also cuts down the amount of time for the guest to get a response from that restaurant, which if you've ever made a complaint to a restaurant, you probably did it over Google. Maybe a week later, if ever someone responded. I think restaurants are getting better about it now. Mambo's excellent about it, responding to people. But having that information allowed us also to see things that were across restaurants. So we sold coleslaw there. So if something was wrong with the coleslaw and it was across multiple restaurants or multiple guests, people will immediately jump on it, figure it out. When I say immediate, I mean that in that minute, the sense of urgency was amazing. So not only are you seeing how good you're doing every day, but the negatives become extremely actionable that way. And we do something similar here at Mambo with everything that comes in. Like we all review them through Google, through a company called Tattle. And we respond to them very quickly. But that particular one, because I built it custom, it's a custom website, me and one other person built, something I'm very proud about. We as a team came up with this idea. It seemed outlandish. It seems crazy for your managers to record every single comment, but it created a culture of people caring about every single guest experience because anytime someone said it, it got recorded. And that's what drives our success in hospitality. Again, it's guest experience and just increasing that guest experience in any way I can.
It's interesting because I can only imagine now thousands of comments coming in on a regular basis. And now with the AI capabilities on top of that, the amount of trends and analysis that you can do on that, that's a part of supporting the business is envisioning and creating a database. If we don't have the data, then what good is the AI on top of it, right? So that's my big takeaway. Here's one thing that I would love to ask you as the last question, because we've talked about so much. If there was one thing that you wanted the audience of your peer community to take away from this podcast episode, what would that one thing be?
I mean, I think it would just be hopefully we're all already doing and stay focused on your guest experience and that guest being the people who work alongside you every day, the people you work for, and the people that you mentor and coach and train every day. And also, I think it's very important that we all treat each other with the utmost respect. Everyone's deserved it. Everyone does deserve it. I think sometimes you get into a workplace, and some people are sitting in a workplace right now today with people who are looking down on them and they're condescending. You don't have to do that. There's great places out there where everyone respects each other and they're all going to grow much better for it. And you can learn from everyone around you, even the people that you hire a new first year IT tech, but he or she had some experience in something else and you learned something new from them. So there's always something amazing to be garnered by relationships with new people.
You know, Here's what I'm sure is that people are going to have more questions. And if they do, would it be appropriate if we gave a link out to your LinkedIn profile that people could reach out to you with those questions?
Sure. I always love to contact new people. So
Well, fantastic. The whole mission of this podcast is to bring different perspectives from the entire pair community, bring those together. And if we can share our own experiences, our insights, our perspectives, and help each other be more successful, that's the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you did that today in a very big way. So I just wanted to say thank you.
well, thank you for your time and for having me on.